Indeed, you're watching KBC Channel 1. This is Good Morning Kenya Entertainment Thursday. My name is Mike. Maybe let's get into a fast conversation. We're talking matters children protection. What are the policies that are being influenced to ensure that the children protection enhances a safe space for children? I'm talking to James Mugambi, who is a programs manager, Action for Children in Conflict. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Mike.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well,
yes.
And thank you for welcoming me in KBC today.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to share with the nation
yes.
on how do we make sure that the children are well protected, the right space for protection of the child, so that we make sure that at least in Kenya, we are able to make sure that children's welfare is well protected. Yes.
If you're talking about influencing these policies, really, what do we mean by that?
Thank you so much, Mike. To start with, coordinating projects at Action for Children in Conflict, it's good to talk about who the organization is. We are Kenya-based kind of a non-government organization, which is established under the FBO Act. And basically, we were established in the year 2004. And across the country, we have been looking at programming that is looking into how do we influence kind of the entire programming, allowed making sure that the right of a child, to make sure that we look into in-depth in terms of making sure that a child is protected. It's good for us as a nation to note that the conscience of a society is measured into how well are you prepared in terms of making sure that you ensure that the rights and the welfare of a child is taken care of. Yes. So as we discuss policies, we are going to internalize in this session in terms of what is in place for the nation, in terms of making sure that the right of a child is safeguarded, which ensures that the future of a child, which is the future and conscious of the future society, of future Kenya, of future services and everything, human resource and everything is embedded on how well do we treat a child.
Looking at all that, how do you describe the child protection policies? Or how does that landscape look like, especially in Kenya?
Thank you. In terms of policies and programs, of course, we are governed from the international law. There is United Nations Commission on Child Rights Commission, and it was established in 1989. And generally, it embeds a kind of a general framework on how the nations that have subscribed to the convention, how do they handle a child? It has 4 principles, and the first principle is non-discrimination, whereby every child, irrespective of gender, irrespective of kind of race, or social background, or anything, must be able to be recognized, should not be discriminated, whatever health status or anything. The second principle is that a child has the right to be heard. In this case, people think like a child cannot talk or speak about what does he want. It's always for us, as we do everything, we should not talk to them. We should always ask them, what is your view? That is a very serious principle that I think we need to ask ourselves, even as we internalize, as we cascade into the Kenya Constitution, the policies within Kenya. How does it look like and how has it been effective? Point number 3, we need to look at the right of child in terms of right to life, development, and other requirements in terms of education and everything, the right to life of a child. But also finally, everything is embedded in terms of making sure that everything done must be done to the interest of a child, because this child is always dependent. So that's the 4th principle. We can cascade down once now, because even when Kenyan law is being done, you're going to realize that we have to refer to the international conventions, which are side treaties amongst the nations, especially the UN charters. In Kenya, we have Constitution 2010, which has Bill of Rights, but of course, it has all rights in terms of how is the rights of a child enshrined. And that comes back to the policy in 2001 that talk about the Children's Act 2001, which was repealed to Children's Act 2022. And basically, that act guides in every programming. How do we treat our children? Alongside the act, we are talking about the right of child generally, of course, in terms of the right to life, the right to education. The child has the right to education, to enjoy the right to education, irregardless, every child must access education. It's a right and it is a must. Right to quality health, medical care, right to protection, sexual exploitation, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and everything. It is enshrined in Children's Act 2022, which is a repeal of Children's Act 2001. And it's good we look into the operationalization of the Children's Act, the current 2002, and we are going to realize, besides the aspect of the rights of a child, it has really changed. For example, the Children's Act 2001 talked about the culpability of a child to crime. In 2001, the Act talked about, for a child to be held culpable of a crime should be 8 years. But in 8 years. But in the Act 2022, it is talking about 12 years. So a child can be culpable. The same Act talks about, you have seen in Kenya, there has been a mushrooming number of children's homes.
Yes.
You institutionalize children. But the Act has really operationalized in terms of making sure that a child has a right to be in a family background, to grow within a home setup. And with that Act is really discouraging mushrooming number of children's home, where you put children under the institution. And the child has a right to choose the father and mother, like now mother and father care. So this Act is like, it's really encouraging institutions to be closed. And in this case, it has aligned in a way that we can only have rescue centers. County, it's the Act as operationalized in terms of the county children's rescue centers, which will be more temporary. Or if you have private centers, they should be temporary instead of permanent. But also established mechanisms in which there will be foster parenting, there is adoption, there is a law around that. How do you adopt a child? How do you do foster care, foster parenting and the rest, so that a child can at least stay in a house that he feels like there's a mother, there's father, but also there's a brother and there's a sister. The Act has also kind of established a very nice framework within the Act. Like now there's the Children's Council of Children's Services, there's a secretary to the Children's Council, downwards there's rescue centers for the children, and also a very robust, the Act has established a very robust kind of mechanism to address issues that are coming out in terms of child rights violation. For example, within every county, there is establishment of, for example, the children's courts, whereby the matters of a child are being held separate from the adults. There is a children's advocate. In every police station, there is an establishment of a gender desk, whereby there is a specific officer who has been trained on how to handle issues and matters child, so that we make sure that the upcoming matters around child protection, they are well addressed by even people who have been really trained. The police are trained, yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Be that as it may, and pegging on what you have said on UNCRC and what is established in the Constitution, how are we faring in terms of implementation? Because there is what is captured in paper, then there is a reality of implementation in as far as child space is concerned.
Thank you. I think we normally say that everything is work on progress, and in terms of, I need to commend the national government in terms of legislation. Kenya is really well versed in terms of establishment of the laws themselves. They are very well aligned. Yes. In terms of implementation, there are always gaps. And what we're going to realize that everything, as I've mentioned, it's work on progress. Because, for instance, the major gap in terms of implementation, of course, is operationalization. Yes. I'll say, for example, when you're talking about county rescue centers, that, of course, they're in the process of, because the Act was just the other day, 2022, I would say that that's something that needs to really be looked at in terms of operationalization. But also, how does the government also, being the custodian of policies themselves, involve other stakeholders in terms of making sure that this is done? I'm saying that because in terms of funding, the other day when we are passing the budget, the Department of Children has really been lobbying to push for allocation of resources to the department to make sure that the policies and programs within the department that safeguards the children's policies, of course, have been implemented because implementation goes hand in hand with allocation of resources to make sure that there is implementation. So there has been a gap in terms of allocation of resources, and that's where you find that there are really gaps in terms of financing, in terms of access to basic and major facilities or services, to make sure that there is equality in terms of all the children.
Has that affected efforts of where, say, children can access quality education and matters to do with health?
I would say yes, because, for example, it also depends, if you look at Kenya, it depends on socio-economic setups. For example, let me go back to what we do at Action for Children in Conflict. We work across the country in different counties, but I will cite one of our programs in Thika, in Kiambu County. You find that, especially in urban setups, we have areas where you have informal settlements. You find that there is a very high, what do you call it? It's a bit of pressure in terms of facilities that ensure that, for example, schools, the schools are congested, for example. Much needs to be done, for example, in terms of capitation, in terms of special services that address areas where there is a differing need, for example, looking specifically where do we need special focus. For example, there's a lot of congestion, especially in slums, in urban setups, whereby the schools are really congested, the facilities are few with regard, of course, in comparison with the number of children. The high poverty levels, whereby some children may not go to school because they slept hungry. Facilities like desk and everything that is needed in schools, they are lower. But also even affordability of basic, like, for example, even school uniforms. For example, you have been seeing children who may not go to school because they slept hungry. Mike, there are children who would just, for example, we are talking about a right of a child against labor. Look, for example, Mike, I'm a child and I slept hungry at night. The first thing that I wake up to do in the morning, I will not go to school. I'll ask myself, why will I get food? So you find that these children are getting out there to the streets looking for jobs to do. In Thika, in Kikuyu, they call it kunyara. And like now, going around looking for scrap metals to get money, even to support the family because the parent has no income. And that is why we also need to ask ourselves, how do we also operationalize in terms of, for example, we have had this food for education. And like in Nairobi, you have seen food for education and others. How, for example, I may look at maybe looking at the gap. I think to make sure that there is equality in children, I would think it would be important for the government to look in future, like in every school there's food, so that when a child
school feeding programs be enhanced.
Exactly. Yes. In terms of now, when a child gets from home, maybe not eat at home, the child knows that when I go to school, I'll eat, and of course that also enhances in terms of an aspect of concentration in class. You slept hungry, even if you sit in class, my friend Mike, do you think that child will pick up anything? No. There's also an aspect of nutrition, not even eating. Maybe a child at night is just eating something that is not balanced because of affordability and the rest. But when school even looks into feeding programs that also enhances nutrition, balanced diets, even knowledge or in terms of intelligence is also based on the nutrition aspect, something like that. And I think you're going to find that if we have more nutritious diets in school, we have more intelligent children. We have more. We will just be building more of a more human resource capital in future when we get more intelligent children more concentrated in schools and the rest. And I think that's the backbone of the future of Kenya.
Okay, all right. When it comes to influencing, of course, it means there must be discussions here and there. And when you look at it, matters to do with children are not really left to the parents alone or the government. So if we are to include children themselves and the youth, how do you see them being included to meaningfully influence the policies that affect children?
One, thank you, Mike, for that question. Basically, the Kenya Constitution has been very clear in terms of levels of participation, in terms of contribution to decisions, that also either in terms of policies enactment, implementation, resource allocation, and the rest. When talking about public participation, it's also about how do you engage the consumer of what you want to do. Imagine we are coming up with a policy of a child, and that child is not part of that. For example, if you go to public participation, you find old wazees, they are aged, good, like the elderly, sorry, I may use that word better. You may find elites who are in books and the rest, but remember in the Constitution, the rights of a child to be heard. Let's ask ourselves, in those public participation, when did we ask children to come, like for example, children's advocates, like champions of children? When did you hear them being told, can you present what you want? You get? I'm not sure it has been kind of promoted. But for example, as Action for Children in Conflict, through a program supported by Teredes Homes and other partners, we are looking into how do we build strong advocates of children. For example, if I'm a child and like I advocate, I'm a child and I'm a champion of child rights and I'm a child, and I speak to my fellow children, I'm within class, I can hear what are their challenges. I can interact with them and they can be able to talk into what we anticipate to, or what our expectations. So we are building stronger, and I think we can also look at that. How do we make sure that the children themselves are empowered to contribute to what do they want? For example, look into, for example, in schools, we have board of management.
Yes.
How many schools involve children in a round setup of board of directors or the management committees of schools? How many involve a child to sit within the board to ask, how are those guys saying? I'm sure it is in the Constitution, but in terms of practice, it's something that we also need to borrow.
That is where we went back to the part of implementation.
Exactly. So in terms of implementation, there are those gaps, operationalization and implementation. I'm sure that's a very important component that we also need to demystify in terms of operationalization and making sure there's involvement. For example, in schools, why do you think you are seeing a lot of strikes, for example? It's because you talk to them, we talk to children instead of involving them. And involving them, it's giving them the space, the right to be heard. You listen to them and reason. You don't talk to them, you engage. Yeah.
And who is to do this empowerment? If we are to empower these children, to enable them to talk, who is to do this?
I think basically looking in terms of the stakeholders needs to understand, first of all, the need. The stakeholders is people who are in charge, of course, the duty bearers. If, for example, the duty bearers, it could be the Ministry of Education. How does the Ministry of Education ensure that there is involvement of a child in decision making, in the board of school management committees and the rest? I think that one, the government may want to make sure that that is well done, and you're going to make sure that those unrest in school will be, think of the first, because the children's, even the thinking of, we are talking of Gen Zs.
Yes.
Gen Zs are saying that we need to be involved. How will they be involved? They'll be, when they're on the table, they're able to say, this is our view. And if there's an alternative, it's about dialogue. Yeah. One, the stakeholders should understand the essence of involvement of a child in every decision that is made. Point number two, it's partnerships. Partnerships involving all the stakeholders. For example, we need to engage, for example, the parents. The parents also need to be made aware in terms of awareness creation and sensitization. They need to understand everything around what affects the child, what kind of is embedded in terms of ensuring that the future of a child is well looked into. People, even they are not aware, people need to be educated on even changing trends and the rest. For example, things have been changing. People don't understand how is the transition of things outside there. Involvement of different stakeholders like the civil society, the private sector. I will tell you, for example, in urban setups like Thika in Kiambu and the rest, we are looking into how do we engage the private sector in terms of ensuring that the right of a child is, for example, child labor. If the community is aware, nobody will give a child a job to do. Are you over 18? If you're not, I'll not give you a job to do this and this. But now you find that there needs to be like that awareness, that engagement. How do you look into the practicality and also what needs to be done by each and every contributor towards the child protection space whereby everyone is a contributor.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's take a very short break. We'll be right back to continue with this conversation. This is a Good Morning Kenya's Entertainment Thursday. Stay with us. Welcome back to Entertainment Thursday. We are talking about influencing policies and recommendations in the child protection space. And now let us look at advocacy strategies, because if influence has to be felt, there must be a strategy. So from your perspective, what do you think are the most effective strategies that we can use to ensure that the influence we are talking about when it comes to child protection policy makes an impact?
Yeah. Now, to understand advocacy, it's about advocacy. It's about ensuring that, one, people who are in charge understand, like in terms of this scenario,
yes,
what is real on the ground. Like that is from policy to practice. Yes, the policy is there, but the application of the policies also depends on the setup. In terms of advocacy, I think the first practice that is very important is, one, involvement of different stakeholders,
yes,
at different levels, different setups, in terms of participating in unpacking the strategies and policies that are in place, and even customize them now to the scenario. For example, in terms of this national policy cascaded to the counties, for example. Yeah. For example, what we have done in Kiambu, especially in Thika, we have brought together all, for example, the civil society network organizations that are in child protection space. How do they work closely with the duty bearers, mainly the government, the national and the county government, in terms of making sure that there's seamless implementation of the policies, but also synergy building? In Thika, for example, we have done what we call Watoto Wetu Network, which, of course, they have an advocacy strategy on how do they come together, whereby the children's officer is involved, the gender desk is involved, they come together, they discuss what are the challenges on the table, and what is the role of each and every stakeholder in contributing to that. So that now, for example, in terms of the national budget, it's a bit lean. It's not enough. And once the budget is divided into different departments, maybe we have a particular county, there's the gender desk or children's office that has allocated X amount of money. Mike, I will tell you that money is not even 10%. But now, in terms of advocacy, first of all, how do we kind of put resources into that? And how do we take advantage of other stakeholders who can come on board and contribute to that? I'm saying this because, for example, within the framework, there's a kitty that the government has done for the child welfare. But there are very many children who needs to be given special focus, like school fees and the rest. You're talking about the national government coming up with the county level rescue centers. Do you think the government will do? No. So I think we need to come up with platforms whereby in every county there's a framework, or there's a platform where different stakeholders, who could be the private sector, the civil society, the national government, when they come on board, they put on the table different challenges that are coming around in terms of making sure that the right of a child is taken care of. But of course, remember, within that platform, we need to ask ourselves, how do we make sure that there is, one, involvement of the very grassroots leaders within those platforms?
Actually, what is their role?
Okay, for example, the ground structures in terms of making sure that, for example, in a particular setup, the grassroots leaders, for example, the chiefs, the village elders, the parents and the associations and those groups, they need to be sensitized so that they can be able to be checking in terms of what are the issues that are coming up. For example, we have child right violation. Who reports them? Who kind of make sure that the community understands this is not right, and how do we go about it? So we also need to build the grassroots structures of child right advocates within the grassroots, so that we make sure that we champion for the rights of our child. For instance, we are running a project that is looking into right of a child to play in support from different partners. One of the challenges we have realized in the communities, especially in area where there is very high population, there are no safe spaces for children to play. And in the Constitution, the right of a child to play and good environment to thrive is a right of a child. But imagine in a scenario whereby you are in a setup whereby there is no field, where children can get out there, play, and the rest. So we are looking into how do we sensitize the leaders to look into what are the infrastructure that are needed to be allocated, either during the public participation and the rest, to be given priority to make sure that that child is in the right environment. For example, in slums and in other areas, you find that if a child has nowhere they can go and interact, they will risk going to like movies, they will have a lot of exposure to crime, there will be a lot of exposure to exploitation and the rest. So in this case, I think basically when we make sure that the community, we have grassroots communities like look into advocating for the right of child are put in place. For example, for us, we are building what we are called parents and caregivers champions, whereby they are like the government, community health volunteers, they need to be sensitized on these things so that, for example, they're able to even assess children who have been violated sexually or physically, children who are doing child labor and the rest, they're able to assess and report for action because the children's office is there, but who represents them on the ground? So we also need to look into what are the structures which within the grassroots that we can take advantage of and make sure that we check on the bottlenecks and gaps that are really maybe preventing us to achieve the real focus of what we want to achieve.
And also an evidence-based approach to these things, would it really help in influencing these policies?
I think so, and that is why we need a lot of research to be done. For example, when you talk about the number of children, for example, either getting pregnant children, maybe the number of children not completing schools, we need to invest a lot in research so that, one, it can inform on actions, and also even enhancing those policies on where are the gaps. For instance, if you look at currently, we participated in the national census on street children. There's a mushrooming number of street children. What are the causes? And that gives an evidence and applaud the government, the department, for taking action of taking count of the street families. And we have been asking them, what do you want us to do? What do you think the government can do? So that is more of evidence. So the government needs to invest in a lot of research, but also involving the stakeholders in terms of providing evidence-based information to inform action. For example, in urban slums, you find that when children get out of school in the evenings, you find them in bags with scrap metals. We need to get a research on the numbers, for example. How many children get from school, then go to do some work to get food in the evening? And generally, a child should come from school, go to home, refreshen, do assignment, sleep. Children should sleep for more than 8 hours so that tomorrow can concentrate in class. But it's the reverse. The child comes from home or from school, goes home. The first thing, the parent tells him, my friend, there's no food. We need to look for food, all of us. He goes there and look for something to do. You bring something on the table so that tomorrow you can go to school. Now, in terms of, we need to ask ourselves, what policies do we need to put in place to make sure that at least, I think, we are reasonable in terms of practicality of these matters. We may talk about a right, but now the environment needs to be,
And how do we track these policies to ensure that they are more effective?
One is feedback. Like we do more of evaluations and emphasizing on feedback from either stakeholders, but also from children's. We can talk about the children's courts or parliaments, engagement forums, where they can be able to give feedback. As we've mentioned, how do we engage the grassroots leaders to tell us where are the gaps and what is working and what is not working. Something else, I think, and the new constitution has put in place, and when we have people who understand the environment around child right programming, you're going to realize that, especially in public participation spaces, in Kenya, even resource allocation, it is dependent on how much do you lobby. Because the resources are few. We talk about how do you present your ideas. If it's county level budgeting, you find that there's public participation forums where you prioritize on your needs. If there's nobody who's talking about the need of a child, we allocate the resources. So we need to ask ourselves, those stakeholders, we are talking about children, when the county is doing county forums, who represents you to talk about a space, open space for a child to play? When there are those forums whereby you lobby for other matters, who lobbies for a kiwanja for a child in a particular area? But if you keep quiet, the government is listening to many other people. In the national level, government also planning, like the national budgets. We need to have serious, and it's a wake-up call to those stakeholders who feel like they need to transform the environment around the child rights, because the government cannot do it alone. It's action and others.
Yes.
How do we make sure that when the national budget, and I have come to understand, most of us does not understand the budget making processes, both for the national and the county. Wanakujaga kusikia, they normally come to hear that the budget was passed. Then they start saying that there's no money. But why are they there to say that we need this? And remember, we normally say in our local language that a cow that does not bring out the voice, it will not be, I don't know how it can, fed, something like that. You know, it is angry. Or a child will not cry, will not be given food. So in this case, the moment we shout, like there's a problem here, and remember, advocacy is about a voice. So when we come together as stakeholders and partners, we are talking about child-led programming, you find a partner is working here, is working there. I want to tell partners, don't work in silos. Come together, bring ideas, evidences and the rest, and I'm sure the government is going to hear. But otherwise, when you keep quiet and the government is listening to the person who is shouting more, that is a law of advocacy. Yes.
Okay, you're very passionate about matters to do with the children's safe space, and I thank you for making time to come and talk about it right here on Good Morning Kenya.
Thank you, Mike.
That is James Mugambi, who is a programs manager at Action for Children in Conflict, talking to us about that topic. This is where this conversation ends. Don't go too far. Vivian Degwa is up next with more entertainment. Stay with us.